Chapter 7. The Allen and Stewart families and the genesis of White Creek Village. With Wolfe's victory on the Heights of Abraham in 1759, Quebec fell to the English, and the conquest of Canada was assured. Going on the assumption that with this defeat the French were permanently crushed in the region east of the Mississippi, adventurers and homeseekers, men who had kept a covetous eye on the wild lands of the colonial frontier, did not wait for the signing of the official peace at Paris in 1763, but began immediately to crowd into these regions, to make their clearings in the forests, turning the trees they felled into homesteads, barns, tanneries, mills, and factories, stores, churches, shops, and schools, to the end that they and their families would prosper, live secure and comfortable in their homes. Of those who came at this time to settle in White Creek, the man in the forefront was Quaker John Allen, Pioneer John as his descendants call him. This hardy frontiersman was born in Dartmouth, Massachusetts, July 29, 1734. On a visit to Boston, or perhaps to Hartford, he had seen the advertisements of those who eagerly sought to persuade enterprising men to settle on the patents they owned in Albany County, and had bought a quarter section of Lot 16 of the Walloomsac Grant, 600 acres flanking the Little White Creeks, the southwesterly corner of which is embraced within the present village. In 1760, John Allen blazed a trail that was shortly followed by several score families of Quakers, Baptists, Congregationalists, and Scotch, Irish and English Protestants of other denominations from New England and Dutchess County, New York. In this way, the village of White Creek was founded. Quaker John and his wife Mary either lived for a time or tarried with their Quaker brethren at the Oblong in Dutchess County before coming to White Creek. He went on in advance of his wife and family to take possession of and improve his enclosure, traveling by sloop to Lansingburg and traversing the distance from that place to his home by foot. After he had built a log house on the creek, a little below the present homestead, he sent for his family. John Allen was a versatile man, a carpenter and a miller. With his nephew, Paul Cornell, he built a grist mill, the site of which can still be discerned about 20 rods above the present home of Mr. and Mrs. William Murphy. Cornell later added a trip hammer for the manufacture of scythes and hoes. The frame house of the Allen homestead was built by the pioneer about the year 1770, and it has since been in the continuous possession of the Allen family. John Allen's older brother, Zebulon, also settled in White Creek, his homestead, the present Marshall Fillmore Farm. His sister Elizabeth married Daniel Cornell, and with their son Paul built the mansion now the home of Mr. and Mrs. Robert Niles and Mr. and Mrs. Donald Niles. Paul Cornell, nephew of the pioneer, became very much a man of affairs in and around White Creek. In addition to the enterprise above referred to, he was associated with Dr. William Richards and Garner Wilkinson in the manufacture of cotton sheeting, having adapted the old Aiken grist mill to that purpose, calling it the Washington Company Factory. In Bennington there was an ironworks with which he was associated. Cornell was an ardent Freemason and finished off a room in his house for the use of the White Creek Lodge, of which he was for several years the master. Dr. William Richards married Sarah, a daughter of the pioneer, and they built the house now owned by Mr. and Mrs. William Murphy. Dr. Richards was the first supervisor of White Creek when it became a town in 1816, and in 1820 was elected a member of Assembly. Besides Sarah, there were 11 other children born to John and Mary Allen as follows: Christopher, who married Maribel Burdick; Gilbert, who was twice married, first to Mary Blanchard, and second to Chloe Waite; John Jr., who was also twice married, first to Rosanna Stewart and second to Mary Hathaway; George, who never married; Anna, who married Ebenezer Duell and lived in Easton, New York; David, who died in young manhood unmarried; Lydia, who married Elihu Cross; Elizabeth, who married Nathan Draper, both sisters living in Shasbury; Rhoda married Calvin Murray, and Ruth married Dr. Elihu Allen, both of Williston, Vermont. Mary married Beardsley Hendricks and lived in Bennington, Vermont. Gilbert lived on the homestead. He, with the Millingtons, was also an early family, carried on an extensive lumber and logging business at the runway above Shaftesbury Hollow. A considerable settlement once flourished there, about which of little trace remains today. Christopher Allen lived where Miss Myra Jones now resides. He employed the skilled G.W. Stanley to construct the house, a splendid example of early workmanship. The ballroom on the second floor had arched ceilings, and much interesting paneling is evidenced throughout. Christopher is said to have kept a tavern there, and there is a tradition that some of the wounded of the Battle of Bennington were treated in an improvised hospital set up in the upstairs ballroom. The early tannery was built somewhat to the rear of Christopher's house, and from this it is inferred that he was also active in that enterprise. John Allen Jr. manufactured hats for the trade. Where or how he learned the business we are not told, but there are many that were who learned it from him in his little shop on the bank of the brook, across from Christopher's home. Among those who apprenticed to John the Hatter was George N. Briggs, son of the blacksmith at Briggs Corners. Briggs abandoned hat-making to study law, became a member of Congress, and later governor of Massachusetts. At a brilliant party he once attended while he was in Washington, a lady said to him, "May I ask, sir, at what college you graduated?" Whereupon he replied without a moment's hesitation and with the greatest gravity and courtesy, "At John Allen's hat shop, madam." Briggs is said to have left White Creek for a lawyer's office in Lanesbury, Massachusetts, with $5 in his pocket earned at haying. The large white house now occupied by Miss Marion Dean on the corner opposite the Allen homestead was the home of John the hat maker. At the Allen Stewart family reunion marking the bicentennial of the birth of pioneer John Allen, the late H.Q. Allen exhibited a Quaker gray felt hat made at the hat shop. Relics that belonged to the pioneer, a silver pin, silver buttons and buckles, a lock of his hair, and other articles were exhibited in the H.Q. Allen and James Allen. The Stewart family from Londonderry, New Hampshire, emigrated to White Creek long after John Allen came. The Stewart mansion stood on the bank of the creek just east of the road, originally the Stewart Cemetery. The Stewart family traced their lineage direct from the English royal house of Stewart. In a letter dated White Creek, August 28, 1818, Joseph Stewart Sr., writing to his son John, explains the royal connection as follows. "By all accounts of our descent, we are of the royal house of the Stewarts. My father was John, the eldest son of my grandfather Robert, who was obliged to fly to Ireland when they were newly married. My grandmother conceived and was sent to Edinburgh, Scotland, and my father was born there. They belonged to the house of the White Rose, yet were not altogether separated from the Black Hall. My grandfather had a good estate in Scotland when he fled from it. King William would do nothing about it, neither would Queen Anne. But when King George came to the throne, then Uncle Samuel Stewart, with the help of the Duke of Argyll, recovered it. I was informed that Uncle Samuel Stewart died without issue, left no heirs. Joseph Stewart Sr., Jr., in spite of his youth, must have been the White Creek pioneer of that family. Born in 1752, he married Susanna Harmon in 1772. Probably had come to White Creek and made considerable progress in improving his property before his marriage. Letters written by Joseph Sr. showed that he lived in White Creek a good deal, probably throwing in with his son and improving the White Creek property. Joseph's sons were David, Joseph III, Enos, and Reuben. His daughters were Rosanna, who married John Allen, the Hatter, Anne, who became Mrs. Asa Kellogg, Eunice, who married Dr. Barnum, and Polly, who married Francis Lauderdale. Of the sons and their marriages, little is recorded except for Sylvester, who found a devoted wife in Elmira Doty of North Bennington. Elmira Doty Stewart kept a diary all her life, and from this diary she wrote a personal history, in which a great deal of information pertinent to the Stewart family is preserved. Since this history touches on a very early White Creek family and gives a vivid picture of early life here, the writer, at the risk of including some irrelevancies, feels in duty bound to his readers to quote freely from it. skipping over its prior contents to the time of her marriage to Sylvester Stewart in February of 1811. We quote directly from her manuscripts as follows. My husband removed me and my little stack of household goods, consisting of one bed, bedding, and bedstead, 2 tables, a kitchen and tea table, 1 bureau, 6 chairs, 1 nightstand, a good assortment of crockery and glassware, a tea kettle, spider, gridiron, toasting iron, and a chopping knife, 1 set of silver teaspoons, etc. To his fathers, Joseph Stewart, Esquire. I was pretty well clothed. I had 11 dresses, 11 pairs of stockings, with every other article of clothing necessary for my wear, all of which I had earned by the labor of my hands and made up. Father Stewart said to me one day after I was fairly settled with his family, Elmira, I will give you as much flax as you can spin. I accepted the offer joyfully, took the flax and hatcheled it, and then commenced spinning, and with my own hands spun enough to make 65 yards of tow and linen cloth, before it was time to spin wool. My husband had sheep. I spun woolen yarn to make 40 yards of cloth. Stocking yarn for the husband and myself, yarn for 2 coverlids. Colored it and had it ready for the weaver by September. September 11th, 1811, my son Asa was born at Father Stewart's house. Early in the month of March, my husband removed to the farm 1.5 miles from his father's, called the Mountain Farm, his brother Reuben living in the house with us. In the course of the summer, I went after Maria H. Johnson, a little girl of 10 years, and a few months to live with me. In the month of January 1813, my husband removed a family to the town of Homer, Cortland County, New York State. He had relations living 12 miles beyond in the town of Locke, Cayuga County, whom he went to see. He was all in raptures with the country. Returned home, made preparations for removal. On the 15th of February 1813, with 3 sleigh loads of household goods, his father driving one team, David Woodward one, and himself one, we left the home of his birthplace to go among strangers. A few days before we left, Mother Stewart came to see us. As soon as she came in, she said to me with her eyes full of tears, Elmira, you are not going to leave us, are you? I said thoughtlessly, I hope so, not thinking how much it might hurt her feelings, for a better woman than she lived not. Well, said she, if you will go, you will want a comfortable cloak for your little boy. Here I have brought you some flannel to make one. I did not even think that I was parting with her forever, but so it was, for on the 25th of April following she departed this life. During the 2 years we resided in Locke, 1813 and 1814, my husband owned 4 places. He built a nice snug farmhouse and repaired 2 log cabins. And in 1815, in February, we left all sold out, and we moved to Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania. We started on the 15th of February, 1815. My 2 babies were only 6 weeks old. I carried one and my sister Sabra the other. We removed into the house with my father and stayed until June, when we went on to our own place at Silver Lake Township. There was 14 acres cut down and burned over, 1.5 acres sowed to rye. There was timber cut for a small frame house in the place when we bought it. My husband and brother William framed the timber, put up the house, shingled it, and planked it up. Threw down loose floor, put 3 windows in, and then we moved in without doors or fireplace, the day that my twins were 6 months old. I cooked out of doors until October, when Edmund T. Locke built us a fireplace and a good hearth, and a nice white ash floor, and to have 2 good outside doors made and hung. And then I took down the blankets that we had used 4 months for doors, and then how nice it was when I could open the door to go out and shut it when I came in. In the month of August 1818, my husband and I started for a visit to White Creek in a 2-horse wagon. Harmon, my son, was nearly 8 months old. I carried him, a large fat baby, all the way in my lap. We visited in Troy, Bennington, and White Creek. Asa Kellogg's wife, Margaret Ann, was then in poor health, and had been spending a little time at Father Stewart's. When we drove up to the house, she came to the windows to look out. She was very pale. We had a good visit the last time that I saw her. She gave me a great many things to take home to my family, which was gratefully received. In these times I used to be very thankful for clothes for my family. In the forepart of October we started for our home. Soon after our return, Sylvester traded his farm for a tavern stand in Delhi, Delaware County, New York. He swapped the farm of 150 acres, a good barn and house on it, for the tavern stand, which had a 2-story house and barn on it, also a horse shed, and 1.5 acres of land lying on the Delaware River. The house was in miserable condition, and he was obliged to make repairs to make it comfortable, or not get any custom, which was the way that we were to gain a livelihood. On May 1st, 1821, we removed to Stamford at the head of the Delaware River, my husband having exchanged his tavern stand for a house and lot at this place. He had launched into the business of carrying the mails. It proved to be a bad business for us, and here all that we possessed was sold by the sheriff. In the month of September 1822, we sold our house and lot and moved to Groton, Tompkins County, New York. In 1825, we moved into a house there opposite Dr. Wright's on the hill. Here we lived some 2 years. I was very sick here, so that my life was despaired of, but through the mercy of God it was prolonged. In the month of July 1827, I prepared to leave my Groton home to take a journey to Bennington and White Creek to try to recover my health. The day after I arrived at Brother Doty's, I had a severe ague fit. Also, Warren's son had a severe ague chill. I had an ague fit every other day. I became so weak after 2 weeks that I could neither dress nor undress myself. My friends thought I must die, and they were also sure that I could not live. That Father Stewart said that I should be brought over and buried in the family burying ground. But the great dispenser of events saw fit to prolong my life. After 2 weeks, I could discover that I gained a little more strength my well day than enough to bear my sick day. I soon was able to ride over to White Creek. My husband left Groton, came to Bennington, found me getting better, went to White Creek to see his father, who immediately beset him to come back and live with him and take care of the farm. He would give him 1/2 of the farm and an equal share with the rest of the heirs in the other half. He accepted his father's proposition, made writing, and went after our children and household goods, returned with them. They came by canal from Groton to Troy, all safe, September 27, 1827. About the 1st of October, we were all safely domiciled in the small house near the mansion of Father Stewart. My husband assumed charge of the whole business, his brother Enos having gone west again. Business all went satisfactorily to Father Stewart. On the first day of September 1828, Father Stewart died. After settling his father's estate and selling his half interest in the property to David Niles, Sylvester and his family once again removed to the west, to Clinton, Ohio, where Sylvester was, as his wife expressed it, perfectly contented. He lived there 13 years, dying of typhoid fever in the year 1846. And that's the end of Chapter 7. Next is Chapter 8, the growth of settlement and business enterprise in the White Creek Village section prior to the Revolution. I don't see too much in error in Chapter 7 that I know of. Let's see here, there was one thing, yes. When it said John Allen came to White Creek, they got a quarter section of land, of lot 16, 600 acres. They didn't use quarter sections and sections until 1785, when the public land survey system was adopted. It wasn't used in New England and eastern New York. The great lots of the Loomsack patent were divided up into about 340 acre lots, and they were usually divided in 3 when the landowner sold them. If John Allen lived close to the creek, as it said, he would have been on lot 15, not lot 16. But whichever one he owned, it was probably about a third of 340 acres, which is 115, 120 acres that he actually owned. Edward Aiken owned lot 16 to the west of him. I'm not sure about all the other lots and who lived where on them. But that sections and quarter sections was definitely an error.